Well, Bawku is boiling. It has forced government to change strategy from one of peacekeeping to one of peace enforcement. What really happened here? If you look at the Ghana map, we are now seeing the Bawku conflict now transcend the geographic boundaries of Bawku for the very first time. If you go to Asawase, for example, we've had the MC for Asawase speak to us today, and for the first time he's admitting that the shooting incident that we saw there, the Kusasi chief who was shot in Asawase in the Ashanti region, may have something to do with the conflict all the way up there in Bawku. And that was a fascinating admission indeed. And so this is no longer an Upper East Bawku conflict. It's becoming transborder within our own jurisdiction. And we're going to get my guest to weigh in on this very important, significant development in this Bawku conflict that has plagued us for decades, really. And now that we're seeing also in Nalerigu, we've seen two shot dead, two SHS students were caught in that crossfire there and killed. If we go to Bawku proper, one SHS student has also been shot dead. That is troubling, considering how far he has to travel to get to the Ashanti region. It is a reason why the national security, the commander-in-chief, is taking drastic measures, and that's how they call it in their statement, government statement, drastic measures, imposing a curfew which is really unprecedented in the area. We'll talk about that pretty shortly. We know that this has been going on for so long. If you look at from 2021 to date, it's claimed over 200 lives. It's clearly unacceptable, but it's taken on a different dimension now that requires a different strategy. And this is a curfew I'm talking about. If you begin to see that this is now becoming a problem that other areas of the country are having to deal with, and there's even a suggestion that somebody may have been shot in Ashaiman that may be also linked to the Bawku conflict, all these needs to be investigated properly and the links to Bawku established. And I'll get my guests to weigh in on that very important issue. But if you see that fact, 200 dead, now they're spilling over, then you probably understand the 2 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew that has been imposed. I dare say in a long history of covering conflicts in Ghana and beyond, I possibly haven't seen a curfew this tight, this strict for the people there. You basically will have 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. to move about. 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. to move about. Beyond which, you have to stay indoors. Really unprecedented indeed, but also tells the gravity of what is happening in that part of the country. So we have armed forces that have been deployed now to enforce the peace. They're no longer keeping the peace. Well, there's no peace to be kept. You have to enforce it in that part of the country. And for the first time, we are seeing armed escort to help students who have been caught in the crossfire. I've told you 2 of them have been killed already, to evacuate. Tonight, we're hearing from the Ghana Registered Nurses Association. They're saying that they can no longer function in a part of the country, in Bawku to be very precise, and so they are also asking that their members be evacuated under armed guard. They don't want an escort to work, they simply want to leave Bawku. So you can imagine what life there is going to be like. And then we know that this is also taking a toll on education, especially when you have the WASI coming up in 8 short days, and yet the students there are now having to be evacuated. How are they going to cope with the WASI coming up in 8 days? I have the former Deputy Director General of the Ghana Education Service joining me tonight because he has written about this. He says there is an emergency protocol that needs to be activated to try and deal with this particular problem. We'll look at that dimension, especially considering the impact on education, and I've invited him to share thoughts with us tonight. So we've seen that in other parts of the country where we've had the security heads, for example, in Asawase, the MC telling us, for example, that this may have something to do with the Bawku spillover. They are doing a few things. We've seen a ban on motorbikes there. We've seen the no bulky clothing while riding on motorbikes. That tells you a lot because of the fear that people hide all these weapons under the clothes. A ban on carrying of licensed and unlicensed weapons, and an increased police and military presence we've seen as a measure to deal with this. But then we have the bigger problem, which the Peace Council is flagging. The Small Arms Commission has flagged also, there are 1.1 million unregistered small arms and light weapons in the system. And much of that is finding its way into Bawku and other areas, and which is why it's becoming so dangerous. The Peace Council says, for example, they trace AK-47 shells that are being used indiscriminately in Bawku. That is a problem. If you want to fix the Bawku problem, you have to stop the flow of arms into the area. I mean, how is that difficult? I mean, Bawku is such a small area. Why can't we just cordon Bawku off, ring fence it, and stop the inflow of weapons, but also go into homes and disarm people? Is that an option, for example, that the state can consider? Well, I'll ask my guests about this. Considering that the government says they need drastic measures. Drastic measures really should mean drastic measures. Is this drastic enough? Is a state of emergency, for example, one that the commander-in-chief should consider? It's another one. And then we know that we're spending quite a bit already. Now that we've had military men go there again on the back of this peace enforcement, they will be spending even more than what you see on your screens now. And then the path to peace has been laid squarely in the bosom of Asantehene. And we know that they began way back. At the time, there was a lot of hope riding on that in June 2023, that Otunfo can bring some peace there, because we know the work that he did in Dagon. So he was entrusted to deal with this matter. It has been fraught with challenges. Recently, the government had to relaunch that initiative. They started, the feuding factions came to the Mensah Palace. We need to get an update on that. Asantehene is doing his best. And then until this happened, if you listen to the government, they believe they were very close to arriving at some settlement. And then this latest eruption. So let's really analyze this and see where we can collectively propose some solutions to this. That this really should be an all-hands-on-deck situation, considering what I've just illustrated and this potential to spill over into other areas in this country. So don't think you're safe if you're in Accra, if you don't join hands to try and find a collective national solution to this problem. I guess after this. And thanks for staying with us here on PM Express. And the PM Express is always brought to you by Syntax Tanks. It is strong, it is tough. It's also brought to you by Academic Times newspaper, and also brought to you by Pepsodent Cavity Fighter. And thanks for staying with us. And just before we start, and we know this is a very sensitive matter, we are treating it as such. We had to withdraw any of the political actors. In fact, one that we had invited into the conversation, that is Ebenezer Ndebila, who is the MP for Zibila. We had to withdraw him, obviously, for how tense the situation is in that part of the country, concerning the spillover. There is no room for any political commentary on the matter. Although, yes, he's a member of parliament for the area and his people are affected by this. We, full disclosure, already had threats on this particular subject. And so we want to treat this purely from the point of view of the experts in the area who can speak authoritatively to what they know, but also the interventions that we need to bring peace to Bawku. And that is why we're going to be withdrawing him. So welcome to PM Express. I'm delighted that we can speak to Colonel Festus Abwaji. He is a security analyst. He's retired military officer himself, and I'm grateful that he could join us, also considering the government's changing strategy tonight on this subject. Also joining me is Dr. Kwabena Tando. He used to be the Deputy Director General of the Ghana Education Service, and as you know, the students there have been caught up in this crossfire. Some of them have already been killed. The schools have been closed, and government is evacuating the students. And this is all happening 8 days before major exams. And so it brings some thoughts and perspective to this conversation that we need. Also because of the policy that has been enacted in circumstances like this. We want to understand that policy and that action blueprint that needs to be activated. So he joins us for this. And Albert Sorry is my correspondent to the Upper East region. And I want to start with him just to give us a sense of what is happening there tonight. And Albert, I know you are in constant touch with what is happening in Bawku. As we speak tonight, on the back of the eruption over the weekend, what's the report coming out of Bawku tonight?
Evans, many of the residents are not happy with the curfew, I must say. I have friends there, contacts who feel that 2 p.m. Is not a good time to be going indoors. There are people who have to travel from their homes to another side of the town to do their work. Now, if they close, say, 1:30 p.m. or 1 p.m. and they have to go back home, and considering they don't ride motorbikes, some use bicycles and all that, getting home, sometimes they may delay on the way. So what happens if they are not able to get to their homes before the curfew time? So a lot of the residents that I have interacted with feel that 2 p.m. Is a bit too harsh, but at the same time, they are complying with it because they have no choice.
Yeah, and you can imagine 2 p.m. to 6 a.m. is quite something to try and endure. But do they appreciate, though, that some drastic measures must be taken in their own interest, in the interest of their own security?
Most of the time when this happens, some of the residents say that the government has this, what they call a firefighting approach to this whole conflict. Because normally when violence breaks out, there are reprisals, people are killed, they start putting in all these measures that we are seeing. Once everything appears to be calm, it looks like everyone goes back to sleep until there is another incident. And so if you talk to most residents in Bawku, they feel that, look, the resolution of this conflict goes beyond just imposing a curfew and putting on these strict measures that we are seeing. It's going to take very pragmatic, measures to bring a lasting solution. And this has been going on since 2022. Mm-hmm. Every time there's an attack, we see more security being brought in. We see curfew being reviewed and all that, but the conflict is not going away. So a lot of the residents just feel that if you talk to them, you just have the sense that they've lost hope in the government, basically.
Okay, and this is this government's first real taste of the conflict, which has been raging for a while. And I believe when they say they've lost faith in the government, they're really talking about how the state has responded.
Exactly, yes, exactly. How the state has responded. How the state has handled the conflict over the years, not just this NDC government, but how it has been since this whole conflict resurged somewhere in 2022. It appears that the measures that they take are always just to bring some calm, but not to deal with the real conflict itself in terms of getting it completely resolved.
Albert, that's a very important point. Please stay with me. I want to bring in Colonel Festus Abuaje into this conversation. Colonel, we all read the statement from government. They said drastic measures must be taken. Their drastic measures, obviously, the imposition of that curfew, which in my mind sounds pretty unprecedented, 2 p.m. to 6 a.m. the next morning. But listening to my reports on the ground there, people seem to suggest that the state's handling of this has been reactionary and that the imposition of curfews have not really helped. This is the tightest one yet. How do you assess the latest intervention that the government is trying to implement there to try and bring things under control?
All right. Thank you, Alfred. Thanks for having me. My compliments to the other colleagues. I don't think we can say that the government the government response is being reactionary. Of course, when tactical situations change, you change approaches. So it's a matter of course that because the dynamics are changing, including the geographical spread, including the nature of the targets, school kids being assassinated in a targeted manner, military convoy coming under attack, the military responding and escalating to the extent where it exceeds its lawful use of force. It's appropriate that the government takes appropriate measures. However, I think we all need to understand that there has never been a peacekeeping in Bawku. And I've always said that we must not use terminologies that do not apply. The term of peacekeeping is not of global application to all manner of conflicts. Bawku is an inter-ethnic conflict in a democracy. So the state now needs to find room for the armed forces to deploy, one, within the laws of the country, and two, subject to international law. So what appropriately is happening in Bawku is an internal security for which the armed forces will be rightly mandated to maintain, establish peace or maintain and restore peace and stability. We don't need to necessarily use the term peace enforcement. Even if the principles inherent in peace enforcement type operations will also be applicable to this situation. So I think that the shift or the transition from peacekeeping to peace enforcement is not applicable. But having said that, there are options other than shifting from peacekeeping to peace enforcement in quotes, which could have been explored. When this conflict escalated in late 2023, following the enskinment of the rival Bawku chief, especially in 2024, the government's response was to deploy a task force of 500. It's about 18 months hence. Has this size, this force strength, has it been sufficient? So one of the first things we want to look at is the size of the force. Can we, for instance, increase it by another 500 to 1,000, or 1,000 to 500, 1,000 to 1,500, or 2,000? Because this operation is about dominating the conflict area. And dominance, first and foremost, is through personnel, boots on the ground. Secondly, there have been occasions in the past when the military was using coupons, fuel coupons, to draw fuel to be paid for by the government. And the government was not paying. The fuel suppliers, who were not charities, withdrew the service. So we need again to enhance the logistics, provide the task force with more vehicle, more transport, including armored ones, give them more fuel. When we come to the geographical spread of the conflict, including the attack on the convoy, for there have been several instances of attacks on convoys, it will suggest that there is some deficit in intelligence. Because once it happened, the state didn't know. The state got to know after the fact. A Sherman, assuming that it is related to Bawku, was also after the fact. The Naregu SHS was after the fact. Bawku SHS was after the fact. So the other option is to enhance the intelligence resources, what technically we call ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And the state has some resources, drones and electronic devices, that it can deploy to support the military effort. That obviously has not been, has not been done. Then we have the case, if you like, of the enforcement of the law. How many perpetrators have we arrested? How many have we prosecuted before the law courts? You see it. If the idea is that nobody has been arrested, nobody has been prosecuted, then we're rather promoting a state of impunity.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a very important point. I mean, I don't recall, because part of this is, not part, it's all of it is a criminal activity. If you shoot somebody and you pick up arms, it's criminal. So why aren't we arresting people and putting them behind bars? And you wonder, Ken Officer Baji, across the country, we invested quite heavily in CCTV infrastructure. We saw homes have been burnt. The MP's home has been burnt. And yeah, we don't have anybody in custody. At least we've not been told we have anybody in custody.
Well, so whatever forms of devices, electronic devices, that can be deployed to support the effort in Bawku, we were placed. In a conversation with somebody, he said, no, that will weaken national security. To the contrary, the task force is actually implementing the national security strategy, whose objectives, one, to keep the country unified. So if we end up being divided along ethnic lines, and wherever you find Kusasis and Mamprosis, they are at war against one another, and there are collateral unintended consequences, then we are undermining national cohesion, the national security. We have always mentioned the proximity of the conflict area to our northern borders, and the possibility, indeed, the record being that terrorists have moved south, not en masse, but sometimes they have come to fight in Bawku. I reflected this in the conflict map that I wrote. So applying some of the intelligence resources that we have is not misplaced. And I've suggested elsewhere in another interview that even if we don't have satellite, and Gardner has not deployed any satellite anywhere, we can buy the service. And the service will be that geosynchronously, a satellite will be on top of Bawku conflict area and gathering real-time intelligence as to who is moving where. That will be a layer of intelligence that enhances the situational awareness. We have deployed drones to the conflict area. The last time I checked, the batteries, like our phone batteries, degrade with time. So the drones, or some of them, are not usable. The state can deploy more resources in terms of drones in order to enhance situational awareness and decision-making.
And you raise an important point I need to then ask you, which is, should a state of emergency be considered as part of it? Because once you do that, then the state then mobilizes all resources to focus on that particular area. We haven't declared that yet, and so, of course, there's no... emergency funding can be made available. You can go, you can bypass all the rules and get, the finance minister to put in resources for that. Should the commander-in-chief be considering that?
Obviously, Evans, you know that I'm not a legal mind at all. But declaration of a state of emergency is not only to empower the state to mobilize funds. Classically, a state of emergency implies that you are suspending the normal rule of law. In other words, the Bawku District Council cannot work. The Mamprusi Traditional Council will not work. There will be a major general, a brigadier general, who will take command of the conflict area. That is what state of emergency in the first instance implies. You set aside the civil administration and replace it with a military administration. And then, of course, the military is going to conduct its business the way that it knows best. And that brings me back to where we have had this argument about the transition from inverted commas, peacekeeping to inverted commas, peace enforcement. There are risks. The first risk would be that whether in conflict or peace, international human rights law applies. And even before we got here, there is evidence of human rights having been violated. Now, the violation of human rights has national security implications. And then also it affects the neutrality of the task force, whose legitimacy will also be affected, which will then have to use, in a cyclical manner, use more force to do its work. And that will not augur well for national security and stability. So I think that the government, i.e. the state, must seek to exhaust all the pacific instruments in conflict resolution. And when all of them, have not worked, then we escalate. I argue that we have not exhausted all the options.
Yeah, and stay with me on that, because we need to explore whether indeed we haven't, considering that the Asante was involved in 2023 up until now, and we know the challenges that has bedeviled that. Please stay with me, and I'll come to Dr. Tando pretty short.
Very, very quickly on that note.
Yes.
You see, Asante is operating at the national strategic level. In 2010, there was a Bawku Peace Council, which has been deactivated, run into abeyance. Why can't we activate it?
Because it failed at the time. It was deemed not effective. In fact, they were even afraid to go into Bawku to work.
Yeah, so we find ways and means of making it effective. What about the National Peace Council? What about the NCC? What about WANEP? These are mechanisms that we can explore. We cannot leave the mediation effort solely at the national strategic level and hope that the Asante is going to work magic. When we can, in fact, let me make the last point before we move on. You are a media expert. Since 2023, have you identified any communication strategy in support of the national effort to, resolve the conflict?
Not that
Are
I
there
know.
any signals?
No.
Do we have, apart from the communicators who meet, like this morning, 2 female communicators, MPP, NDC, throwing mud at one another and actually deepening the conflict? We have not had any effort in the media spaces, whether printed, electronic, or whatever it is. We have not targeted the different socioeconomic, cultural groups in the conflict. We have left everything to the Asante. And then between the Asante and the Bawku Street, the field has now been captured by the 2 ethnic groups. And you are aware that there are a number of WhatsApp platforms that have been established.
Yeah, absolutely.
By both parties, rather complicating the effort to resolve the conflict.
You're absolutely right. In fact,
let me end here. I have probably
an investigation we did last year showed that the social media has now been used to actively mobilize to commit crime and to target the other ethnic group. It's similar to what we found in Rwanda. And this is a pretty chilling. When we did that real data mining of the web, we discovered that, and that is something that we actually have filed with the national security. And we identified some of the individuals behind it who were using words like cockroaches, etc. That is how bad it was when we discovered that. And I'll come to Dr. Tando pretty shortly, but Albert, can you give me a quick update on the evacuation of the students from the senior high schools there? Because that really was what compelled government to take this new strategy, considering that the students were being targeted. Do we know if that has started and how successful it's been since this was announced?
Yes, Evans, this morning when I had a conversation with the municipal chief executive for Bawku, he said that as at this morning, they had evacuated almost 90% of the students from the various schools. The rest of the students were expected to be evacuated by the end of today. So as we speak, except if there was some challenge that we haven't been informed about. All the students should have been evacuated by now. What he did also tell me is that on Monday, the students, some of them are expected to start with their practical exams for this year's WASI. And so the plan is that on Sunday, they will have to start bringing in the third year students to prepare for their exam. To do this, they will have to coordinate with the Municipal and Regional Security Council to again provide them with escorts to come back to school. And then while they are writing the exam, they will also station some men in the various schools to provide protection so that they can go through with their exams. The challenge that they could have is that not all the students are going to write their exam on the same day. Some will have their papers on different days and all of that. And so they have to continuously discuss how they are going to prepare for all of this. And even on the days that the students do not have papers to write, what will be the security measures in place to keep them protected to stay in school and to study, conducively in order to be able to pass.
Really, really complex, fascinating stuff indeed. And that's why Dr. Tando, good gracious, is with us. Is there a playbook for dealing with this?
Absolutely. Absolutely, there is a playbook. Now, in 2020, we were all in this country when we had the health crisis of COVID-19. And when that health crisis happened in COVID-19, we constituted a number of committees. One, to figure out how to ensure that children or students can learn outside of their classrooms and their comfort zones in homes and other places because of the nature of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay.
So post resolving that issue around how to help students to learn, in the wisdom of the government, we began to look at what do we do in other emergencies. We knew COVID-19 was not going to be the last health emergency.
Okay.
We knew that there was going to be other emergencies that may happen, be it natural disasters, conflicts, and other health crises or public health crises. And so we constituted a team. Luckily and fortunately, I chaired that intersectorial team to establish what we call the Education in Emergency Contingency Plan, to ensure that learning can continue, to ensure that students, regardless of the situation, be it a health crisis, a conflict situation, or a natural disaster, that we can have some continuity of learning. So yes, there is a playbook. That playbook sits at the Ghana Education Service. It sits at the Ministry of Education. Now, within that playbook, we have actually activated it. Post the dam spillage in Akosombo, 108 schools had to shut down. And the Ghana Education Service, within a matter of 48 hours, activated the Education in Emergency Plan to ensure that learning continued. And in this plan, the development partners are on standby. So I urge my colleagues in education, the Director General of Education, the District Director of Education, the Minister of Education, to visit that Education Contingency Plan. Because one of the things we need to understand is that governments, ministries, agencies are in perpetuity. And so regardless of the leadership, there are playbooks in place.
In this particular instance, what does a playbook prescribe?
The playbook prescribes a number of things. Number one, you set up a district disaster management committee. For the education, because it is education that we are looking at, it is headed by the District Director of Education. You have the Ghana Health Service representative on there based on what the nature of the crisis is. You have the municipal security team that is part of a crisis like this. And then you look at a number of things that you can do to make sure that learning continues. In this particular instance, our understanding is that Bawku Senior High School, as well as Nairobi Senior High School, have been closed. So our immediate concern is the final year students. Now, under no circumstance should you ever think that you would bring children back to a conflict zone, even under tight security. They are not going to be mentally stable to write exams. The opinion or what I put out today is that at this stage, the playbook says work closely with the West Africa Examination Council. They are the ones that are mandated for examinations. And then what you do is you look at where you are deploying the children to. They are all going home.
Yes.
They have all been registered by West Africa Examination Council. So if you send some of the students, some of the students go home to Wa, some to Tamale, some to Navrongo, some to Accra. The West Africa Examination Council has exam centers across the entire country. So all you do is you give letters of authentication to each student to be sent to the nearest center. All schools are run by Ghana Education Service anyway. If there are 10 students coming in Accra, you put some at Presec, you put some at Accra Academy, you put some at Achimota, some at Accra Girls. You can accommodate these students on these other campuses so they can actually write the exam not under armed guards, but under peace and serene environments. So to say that you are going to bring them back to school means you have not visited the playbook.
So in other words, the first thing they needed to do, take the students out of the theater.
Yes.
Completely.
Yes, which is what they have done.
But now, but to write the exam, they're going to bring it back.
It is.
So that is not.
It is absolutely dangerous.
No. Okay.
It is absolutely dangerous, regardless. And the whole thing is, even if you have the best battalion protecting these kids coming back onto campus, peace of mind will not be in that child's mind. That is why the plan calls for looking at where those children are being deployed to.
But what about those children who hail from Bawku themselves?
If they hail from Bawku, the plan says that look for neighboring, safer municipals, send them there. You can send that child to Tamale. You can send that child to Navrongo. So instead of sending them home and saying, come under armed guard every day to write an exam, for the next 5 weeks, we are sending you to Tamale Senior High School. We are sending you to Navrongo Senior High School or Bolga Girls. And for that 5 weeks, that will become your station. Because in all of this, the number of students you are deploying for exams across the country, it's not between the two schools, will not be more than 1,000 or 1,000.
Especially once you've dealt with those who don't come from Bawku, who have left.
They've left.
You have a smaller group of students you now have to disperse.
So the plan is that take the education in emergency contingency plan. Look at what the prescriptions are. Sit around the table. Work with the West Africa Examination Council. And then all they do is figure out where that child is going to be and deploy their examination to that new center rather than bringing them under armed guard. So that would be one of the key recommendations that we would give to the Ghana Education Service and to the Ministry of Education, and to work closely with the West Africa Examination Council to make sure that that is done. Then you can begin to think about the Form 2s and the Form 1s. And even with that one...
Hold the thought there. Before we come to Form 2s and Form 1s, I want to bring in the Isaac Azunaba, who is the MCE for Bawku, because he's the chair of the Security Council there, and he's managing this whole process. I want to get to understand how they really plan to get the kids to write the exams, and also the school situation tonight, so we can have a better clarity on that. Isaac, I'm grateful that you could join us here on the PM Express on this very difficult period for you. I know you are new, but you are trying to handle it under very trying difficulties and times. And so, again, I acknowledge that. Isaac, quickly tell me, first of all, as we speak tonight, since the change in strategy, the military strategy by the Commander-in-Chief from peacekeeping to peace enforcement, what's your assessment of the security situation as we speak tonight? Has calm returned fully to Bawku?
Yes, calm has returned fully to Bawku.
Great. And you have enough military on the ground?
Yes, we have enough. As I said, being told we'll have more men coming to add the number on the ground.
Okay. And so you are expecting more additional men to be deployed to Bawku. And Bawku is a big place. Even the constituency alone, it is quite significant. To cover the entire constituency is going to be challenging, obviously. How many men in all are you expecting?
Currently, we have over 400, and I'm being told we are expecting about 400 in addition.
So that will be 800 strong armed military men.
Yes, please.
Okay. Before this latest eruption, you already had some military on the ground, did you not?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the 800, is it in addition to what you already have? Are they new coming to augment what you already have?
No, we have about 400
Already?
plus,
Okay.
before this recent incident.
Okay.
And then this law enforcement is bringing in another 400
Out of 400.
to augment the 450 we were already keeping the peace.
Okay, so your 800 men, give or take, will that be enough to restore, not restore, enforce the peace across Bawku?
Yes, on a layman opinion, I think it's okay.
It's okay. And let's talk about one of the most sensitive matters that you have to deal with. You know, the WASI, the West African Senior High School Certificate Exams, starts in 8 days. And also for parents who are listening tonight, who are anxious, especially for those in the final year, what is the plan to get these children to write the exams?
Yes, when we were interacting with the students, when the decision came to give them a break so that they can go have interaction with their parents, reassure their parents, and their parents also reassure them, and their parents will see them and be comfortable that their wards are alive and healthy. We inform them, we discuss about the exam. We discuss about the exam, and then we give them the expected roadmap as to how they will be brought back to write the exam.
Okay, so what's the roadmap?
The roadmap we decided was that we will send security to pass them. We send back. We don't want them to come by themselves.
Okay.
We look for school passes to bring them to the campus, and then we'll place security. I mean, yes, police, non-military police on the campuses, and then these students can write their exam in safety and in peace.
Okay, so these buses, considering that the students are, I believe, from all over the country, really. Some of them are maybe from Accra, because you know how the computerized placement system operates. So where is the meeting point, the convergence point for these buses to transport them into the conflict zone? How is the logistics going to be managed?
Basically, the regional capital is where we pick them and where we send them.
Regional
when
capital?
They get to the regional capital, Bolgatanga, where they get to the regional capital,
okay,
they are able to go to the other adjoining communities or towns.
Okay, so what you expect is that if you are in Bawku SHS, for example, and you're in Accra, you travel to Bolgatanga, and then you have a bus that is waiting for all of them to converge and then drive them into Bawku to write the exams.
Correct.
Okay, but again, so on days, because the exams will last for, Mr. Dr. Tando, two weeks?
About 4 weeks.
4 weeks, okay. So for days when they are not writing exams, some of them have exams, and they have to sleep on campus, what happens? Well, so for the 4 weeks, what happens?
And you know, we all have written this exam before. If you have not finished your paper, it's usually not advisable to leave campus. It is advisable to stay on campus and study. So once you are there and your paper is not ended, we advise that you should stay on campus, still be guided, and then until you finish your paper, then you can go safely to the house. Let me add that this recent happening on the Saturday is a very unfortunate and sad one that happened. the conflict has been imposed for centuries. It has never happened to any of the schools. No students have been affected. So this is, let me put it, an isolated case. And as security ministers, we are putting all measures in place to make sure that it doesn't occur at all. We are engaging all the communities, we are engaging the transit authorities, we are engaging the security experts, we are engaging the school authorities and all concerned to make sure that such an unfortunate incident doesn't occur in the future.
Okay, and
so
then
I can assure you that I'm not expecting anything of that sort to happen again.
what about students who live in Bawku who have to commute from home to campus and back?
Oh, they are safe. They are safe to commute from their homes to the school. There will not be any problem. They will not face any challenge.
What makes you say that, though? Because even for health workers, they are afraid to move from home to the hospitals and back. Tonight we've heard from the Ghana Registered Nurses Association who say they want their nurses evacuated completely from Bawku, and then when it's under control, they bring them back. So you can imagine parents sending their children, moving from home, walking to school to go and write exams. That commute can be risky. I mean, what are the practical measures you are implementing beyond just saying they're safe to give assurance to the parents?
Yeah, so what is usually most of the schools, when it comes to exam, even if you are a day student, you are being brought in to the campus to write. Most of the times they are not staying in their homes and coming to the school. And it is more, it requires our attention, our support to ensure that all those who are there, because of this incident, those who are there and they may have to stay in their house and come, will ensure that they rather stay on campus and then they can have their exam safely.
So to be clear, those day students who live in Bawku will now, just for the purposes of the exams, will be housed in their senior high schools for the entire duration of the WASI.
Yes.
Okay. Please stay with me for a second. Dr. Tando is the former Deputy Director of the Ghana Education Service, and he chaired that committee that drafted the, what do you call this again?
Emergency contingency.
Education Emergency Contingency Plan. You've heard the specifics. He's the Chief Security Officer there, the head of the Municipal Security Council. He's telling you the measures they put in place. Your response to that?
Well, in a very volatile situation, regardless of the battalions you have in place, you risk the lives of especially children and teachers. The incidents that happened, that caused the security team, including the MCE, as well as the Director of Education, to deploy the kids home, happened in the school that he now wants the kids to come into. So one of the key things is you also have to look at the psychological situation that you are bringing these students into. This is a place that untold violence have just happened with deaths of students. And you are telling them to come and sit in this environment. Even with a battalion around them, they are going to be jittery. And that is why the recommendation from the Education in Emergency Plan, which was done cross-sectorial and multi-sectorial, is that deploy the students to places where there is that assurance that it is beyond the conflict zone. You have children's lives at risk. You cannot allow children to sit and write for exams under armed guards with the things in the back of their mind that there could be an attack. There could be an incident. So in volatile situations, I would plead with the leadership of the Ghana Education Service, with the leadership of the Ministry of Education, and with government itself, represented by the municipal director, the MCE, to look at what is in the best interest in terms of safety, security, and peace of mind of the students. And that is enshrined in that playbook, the Education in Emergency Contingency Plan. It doesn't cost anything to refer to that contingency plan and look at what can be done to ensure that the best thing happens for these students. Because the whole thing, you are deploying a child on Tuesday. Let's say one of those students live in Cape Coast. You've deployed them to Cape Coast. Then you are telling them that a week later, come to Bolgatanga.
I believe they're starting on Monday, if I'm not mistaken.
So in less than a week, come back to Bolgatanga.
And as Albert says, they haven't even completed the evacuation yet.
Exactly.
So it's like a 10% more to go.
Exactly.
So let's say tomorrow is Tuesday, you complete it.
And then you're telling them latest by Sunday,
and they have to travel
should be back in Bolgatanga. Come and sit on a bus that you have arranged with military escorts back into the school. That alone, you are telling the child that you are driving them into a conflict zone. You are driving them into danger to go write an examination. When that child that you've sent home can easily sit and write that exam in Cape Coast, when that child you've sent home based on that playbook can sit in Bolgatanga and write that examination, I don't think that this is the time to look at bravado. This is the time to think about the future of those kids and know that a plan is in place. It has been in place. We have executed it before during the flood situation. It worked. And so we need to go back to that education in emergency plan. And then let's look at some of the recommendations. If help is needed, we are here to support. It is about the future of this country.
It's very possible that maybe they haven't, they are not aware. Let me just ask Isaac. Isaac, in the conversation with the education authorities and considering how this is a sensitive matter, the Jubilee House itself got involved. You think, obviously, that this has been sent up the chain. Have you been told at all of the education in emergency contingency plan that can be activated in circumstances such as this?
I have not been told, but I'm aware. I'm aware. We had a similar killing in the Bawku Technical Institute. They were writing the exam, and that was the day the community, the youth had an impasse with the military. It was very, very, very volatile situation. But I can tell you, the following day, everything was calm. We were able to bring the examiners and we were able to start that peacefully. I must that from the expert perspective, I just declare that, I mean, we can activate the education emergency containment plan, and then it can work fine. But I think we may have to add local situations, the local environment, the local culture of area of the people. When I went to school, when the children were being asked to take a break, no bus gone on Bolga. Because of the conflict in Bawku, most of the students are not coming from far, just like before. Those days, we had a lot of students coming from Tamale, from Kumasi, from Cape Coast, and other ones. But because of the conflict situation, I'm not sure, but I don't think we have a lot of students coming from those areas. Most of the students are local community children. They are just within from Pushika, Garut, Pani, and all that.
But the plan also says for those, you can also get them to write the exams in the neighboring communities where WAEC has exam centers. And so you don't have to bring, even for those who live in Bawku, you can take them out of Bawku to the closest community where WAEC has an exam center so that they can write there. That is what the plan says, according to Dr. Tando. Is this something that you would consider?
Yes, it's something we can consider, but as I said, we may have to sit together with all stakeholders, the education community,
including WAEC, by the way. WAEC, they license the students.
Yes, including WAEC. Yes. Exactly, all stakeholders. We may have to look at it together, and also even the parents of those
Absolutely.
children should also be
because I
part of the
tell you what,
decision.
I'm a parent, and I don't know about you if you're a parent too, but I mean,
Yes,
speaking
I am. I am a
speaking
parent.
as a parent, I would not want my child back in that school under military escort to write exams. I wouldn't want that, because you would just be wondering, is he safe? Is she safe? Is the military going to protect him? If a bullet is fired right now, and we know that even police and military convoys have been attacked before, right? And so,
Yes.
I mean, as a parent, I'm just thinking as a parent, I wouldn't want my child, even if you tell me they have an escort of military, with a full armored vehicle, etc., flanking the bus. I will still, it won't be something I want my child to. I'd rather that ward of mine misses the exam than risk a bullet, going to the bus and injuring somebody. You understand why this is such a sensitive matter that we need to reconsider the approach we've taken.
Yeah, it's something we will have to look at it. As I said before the exam, before fourth week is the reporting day, I think we will have to sit and then take decisions as to while the students have gone home. We are in touch. We are going to be in touch with the headmaster and the school authorities. We are going to be communicating with the students as to the best way for them to be able to write the exam.
Yeah.
As I was saying, it is because most of the students are from within. In some way, I don't know how you see, but in some way, some people feel even safer within Bawku to write the exam in Bawku than traveling somewhere else. You may not know this, but as somebody on the ground, I know this.
Yeah.
And most of the people may tell you that they even feel more safe in writing the exam here than you sending them to a new environment where probably they think that there's not enough protection for them.
Okay.
The concern may be those who are not coming from Bawku, but we have to look at the numbers. We have to look at the possibilities. If we have to combine the approach, it's not a bad thing. If there are a few other students who are not coming from here, and together with Wayik, we can make arrangements and write it somewhere, I don't think it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
But I personally think that it will not serve most students good if they are being asked to go elsewhere to write, considering the security situation in Bawku.
Isaac, thank you very much for bringing that clarity to this issue. And Doc, before I come back to you, I want to get Ken Officer Obaje's take on this part of the conversation, the security arrangement being put in place right now to guarantee the safety of the students who will be returning to write their WASI. Ken, retired, give me your security assessment of what you just heard there.
Well, first of all, there is a technical aspect about, keeping children in conflict environments. We have been overtaken by circumstances. If the military presence was strong enough and had been able to preempt the attacks on these educational facilities, then would have assumed that there is no reason to evacuate them. Once the attacks have happened, there is a psychological impact that Dr. Tando referred to. I wouldn't rule it out. It's still possible if the military or the task force is speedily reinforced for them to be able to secure or provide security for the educational facilities in order for the children, for the reasons why the chief executive of the MUSEC, enumerated, to remain in their traditional areas of education to write their exams. I don't think it would be hugely out of place for that to happen. But the option must be given again, to individual parents like yourself who will not feel comfortable their wards or their children are in conflict areas writing exams. But Evans, if you may permit me, I need to do a realignment between military doctrine and political intent. At the military training schools, we are not taught to enforce peace internally within our borders. We are not taught to keep peace internally within our borders. We are taught to maintain and restore peace and security subject to national and international laws. The military personnel will understand what the political authority means by peace enforcement. But it's a term of art. They will better understand if you told them, maintain and restore peace and stability, because that's what they are trained for. And I think it's very important that we address that. And I will appeal to the media to try and use the correct terminologies. Secondly, when we talk about, well, I know that there are about 500. 500 is two companies. The company is about 120, let's say. So, 240 or three companies or what, but it's still less than a battalion, which is about 680 or 700. So when you augment to 800, you are effectively talking about battalion strength. But for each size of force, a certain percentage are people who provide the combat service support, the food that we eat, those who maintain the vehicles, those who fuel them, those who drive. They don't take direct part in the combat. And sometimes they are about 30% of the force. Definitely 10%. So when you have 800, effectively you have maybe 600 who are actually doing, the real military work of patrols and static security and convoy escort and so on. Remember, some of them are senior officers, they are, leaders. The colonel who is in charge, the other lieutenant colonels, the deputy, the whoever. These are not, foot soldiers per se who do the work. I would still suggest strongly that we need to augment the size of the force. I don't think we have exhausted the available force at home. If we can do that, the task force will be able to dominate the area. The escorts will be enhanced. And then it will become a bit more difficult for, these negative elements, or the spoilers, if I should put it that way, to be targeting these individuals.
And two quick questions on that. How many then would be ideal? 2 battalions? And for how long would you keep them there?
Well, I'm talking about principles. The colonel, I don't want to mention his name. The colonel who is on the ground, and he is not even the one who works out the force size or force strength. This is the responsibility of general headquarters and army headquarters and so on. There is a technique that we call troops to task. So they determine the military task to be conducted, and then they're able to estimate how many units, i.e. the numbers of troops and the size of units that will be required for escorts, for this, for that, for that. You see it? So I can only theoretically say that the size of the force must be augmented.
Okay.
But the officers and men in Burma camp and elsewhere know the procedure that they will use to, suggest to the government that if you can allow us to deploy, and remember, we are not under this martial law. Military is subject to civil control. If you allow us to deploy X number, and remember the X number will have cost implications.
Yes.
But the government must make the funds available. The meals, the maintenance, the fuel, I didn't even talk about the accommodation.
Yeah.
What are the conditions under which these officers and men, both police and military, are operating in Bawku. For months on end, their morale depends on the environment in which we create for them to be able to operate. So those are things that both the commanders and the political authority needs to factor into how they are able to, design the force to be able to achieve exactly what they have in mind, which is not law and order. Because that law and order statement in paragraph 2 of that statement was a bit out of sync. You don't do peace enforcement and maintain law and order. But I understand why the politicians, frame some of these statements like that, although they lead to a bit of ambiguity in the minds of, the soldiers and the officers who must be executing the task.
Fascinating indeed. I mean, the more I listen, the more it sounds very complicated. But as far as the, Dr. Tando, as far as the emergency contingency plan is concerned, the MCE is quite receptive of exploring the options. Thankfully, he says he's aware and that they're going to re-engage on that because, again, those students who have left, you don't have to necessarily ask them to come back. So hopefully something changes as far as that is concerned. But who is a custodian of this plan? I mean, every policy in the organization, they'll tell you who the custodian is. Who's the custodian of this education ministry?
The custodian is the Ghana Education Service.
Okay, but in the Ghana Education Service, there must be an officer who's
well, at the end of the day,
General?
the Director General is the custodian of that particular plan.
Okay.
And so the Director General must lead that particular effort. When I was there, because schools fall directly under quality and access, that responsibility was then delegated to me. And so during the Akosombo spillage, it is myself who activated that plan, led everything. And so the Director General must just look at what needs to happen, work with the District Director of Education, who will then work with the municipal security team to see what is possible, to make sure that you provide continuity of learning.
The MC makes a point about those residents in Bawku maybe feeling more safe if they write it in Bawku than taking them to another community.
Well, I believe that once that district disaster management committee is put in place, they can look at the plan and see what augmentation or what changes they may want to make to that plan based on the local context and what works for them. Colonel Festus, who I know is also a Prempeh College graduate, Senior Festus, talked about the fact that, if you have peace and security restored, then there is that comfort. Then, of course, you look at what can be done. But you need to be able to ensure that you provide that opportunity for those that don't feel comfortable to have their children coming back into Bawku or into their schools to be able to write that exam. And options are available to consider to make sure that there is continuity of learning, that everybody is able to write that exam, write it in peace and security and with that peace of mind and without any psychological trauma to write that exam.
I mean, Dr. Tando, I'm grateful that you joined us. Colonel Festus Obaji, thank you too. My colleague Albert Sori, who joined us from the Upper East region, the capital there, that is supposed to be the convergent point for the students who will be heading back into Bawku to write. At least on the back of what we heard from the MCE, we may have a change in the strategy they've adopted to bus everybody back into the conflict zone under armed guard for them to write the exam for at least, a month, 4 weeks?
4 weeks.
We keep an eye on what is happening there. But as I said at the beginning of the show, this is having an immeasurable toll on the people there. It's taking an immeasurable toll. Tonight, the Ghana Registered Nurses Association said they are demanding that their members be evacuated from Bawku. So just imagine nurses all evacuated from Bawku. The hospitals there will have no professional. the doctors will also leave. And just imagine if you're not well in Bawku, then you are on your own. That really is what we are talking about. The education infrastructure is currently down. They've closed the schools, banks have closed. Life basically has come to a standstill. There's a reason why peace has to prevail. I know the Peace Council is doing some work and trying to get both sides to talk, but you need to give peace a chance. It's in everybody else's interest. As we've seen, this is now happening in Shaiman, in Asawase. It's now become a trans-border issue beyond Bawku. And so, yeah, hopefully we get some resolution to this quicker than has been suggested. 800 strong armed officers are going to be on the ground. Enjoy the rest of your evening.